bring us back. I'm going to be moderating this next panel discussion, and I'd like to welcome our 4 panelists to this group. We have, and the panel is entitled, "What's Your Library Using? Technology Adoption in a Pandemic or Anytime?" Because, you know, we were already about technology before the pandemic, but now it's just like, you know, there's got to be a technology solution for every problem. I think it's just so much more in our minds these days. My thought, there was some board conversation that kind of prompted some early discussion about how are all these libraries using all these new modules and tools that we see in SpringShare and other platforms. How are we using those? Which ones do we find most effective? What kind of needs are we trying to address? So I thought, let's pull together a panel of some people at different schools who have a role to play with that, and see what they have to say. I would very much love for all of you to chime in with thoughts about and ideas about what you're doing at your school too. I know the panelists are they're just as much interested in hearing what other people have to say as much as answering the questions themselves. That was the big takeaway I got from our pre-work, was the things that they were willing to speak about were the things they were most interested in learning about, which is always the good hallmark of a good conversation. So I'll be putting the questions in the chat as we go through the conversation, and you can just feel free to fill in. If I feel like there's time or a space to do it, I might bring in a chat question or comment into our online, our voiced conversation here. And if there is time and way, I'll feel free to bring you in with voices as well. But let me first introduce you to our panelists. We have Erica Behling, library faculty at College of Lake County. Hi, Erica. And we have Martinique Hallerduff, associate professor of library and coordinator of the information literacy program, reference and instruction, at Oakton Community College. Welcome. And Marie Martino, systems and catalog services librarian at Moraine Valley Community College. Hey, Marie. And Amanda Wiesenhofer, electronic resources and library systems administrator at Lincoln Land Community College. So the questions we've gone over, we've kind of looked at them together. And the first question, I'd like all 4 of you to respond to some degree to this first question about student needs and faculty needs. I'd like to know about what kind of student and faculty needs that you found are most important to address with a technological solution, particularly in the time we're in right now. And then what's been your approach to that? I'll just let whoever feels like going first out.
I'm happy to jump in. Once again, I'm Martinique, I'm from Oakton. And for me, I really wanted to make sure that we had, that we were reaching our students one-on-one, since they couldn't walk up to the reference desk. And I know some of the different schools here may have been offering in-person reference even this fall, but we were not. So I think, like a lot of other places, we were using Ask Library from SpringShare, which we had been doing previously, but we hadn't been using the Zoom function. So we changed our forms and made sure that students know that they could have the appointment via chat, Google Meet, Zoom, or phone, and that we would contact them to actually meet live. But I think so many students are anxious anyway about research and navigating the library. And when all of their classes moved to online, or especially this fall, we had brand new college students who were starting school for the first time after finishing up a trying year of high school. So I really just wanted to make sure we could talk to them, maybe see them if they were interested in doing that. So that was a need that was really important to address. And all the librarians at Oakton really just jumped on with that, and we're happy to do it. I think because it tends to be a lot of people find it to be a rewarding part of the work, is to meet individually with students. So that's something that was a priority, and actually a pretty easy transition.
Erica, I see you have your mic on. You want to go?
I just wanted to add to that is I mean, I don't have much to say. I think we all kind of know that our students need that personal connection. But I think it was really important when we first moved online that they had that human contact. At our library, at our institution, there was no other live chat functionality for the entire college. So it was like, oh my gosh, I can actually get a human. I'm not going through a phone tree. And now they see the library as that place where, wow, I always know I'm going to get someone who is going to be able to do something for me.
Excellent point. Excellent
Yep.
point.
I was gonna say that's all of the librarians I work with, that's our main goal. We try to stay student focused and making them feel comfortable, making them feel accommodated, being available for them, you know, in a virtual or, you know, in-person format too. So that was our focus. And yeah. Making sure that they're getting the same service and attention that we typically provide, regardless of where they're at, you know. So I think too, like, you know, we're not thrilled that we went through the pandemic, but there are good things that will come out of this, you know, lessons to learn for the future.
How about you, Marie? Anything different to add or more the same, which is also important? Oh, you're on mute still.
I'm so sorry. I do that every meeting. I would say, in addition to what was mentioned, one thing that was really huge for us was equipment distribution and checkout. Initially, we started distributing or checking out our equipment for the term for students who didn't have access to devices. So we started out with just us, but then we worked with IT and we started distributing equipment that IT had. And then as the year has gone on and we got CARES money and foundation donations, we've increased that. And so we actually went live with LibCal around the time the pandemic, I'm sorry, not live. We had just contracted LibCal around the time that around the time the pandemic happened, like in February, late February, March. And so one of the tools that we used was the LibCal Equipment Reserve module, as well as the appointments tool. We use the appointments tool to arrange and schedule for curbside pickup with students, because at the time the school was closed, but our circ staff, our awesome circ staff, was manning the desk and trying to get resources to students. So that was huge for us. That was one of the big things. And then just sort of a low level easy update we did was systems wide. We automatically extended due dates. We turned off overdue notices and billing, not just because we didn't want, you know, folks coming to the school and the library when it was closed, but also just, you know, to put some goodwill out there, some less stress in a very already stressful time. Those were some of the big projects.
Thank you all. And the answers are, I think, what we would kind of anticipate. The students are obviously our main focus. So, you know, just trying to make them feel comfortable and get the stuff out the door seems like that's the most practical things. Let me just ask this follow-up about what kind of changes did you see in usage with your services? Did it increase, did it decrease? What kind of surprises did you encounter?
I pulled some statistics because I knew the question was coming, and I think they're insightful, and perhaps you're seeing the same things at your institution. So I kind of looked at the 2019 to 2020 and then 2020 to 21. In our chat usage from 2019 to 2020, that spring semester went up 318%. And then even from last year to this year in our spring semester, we were up 42% from that. Our appointments, 2019 to 2020 in spring semester, they rose 77%. And then this year, so from 2020 to 2021 of spring semester, we were up 105% even over last year. So we've had huge growth in our numbers overall.
What about the rest of you, even anecdotally, what's been your experience? Have you seen an increase?
We've seen an increase at Oakton. The tricky thing for us is that we had just switched over to electronic tracking of a lot of stuff at the beginning of last spring semester. So we had, like 2 months of getting used to that, which we're still very much getting used to it. So we don't have the same kind of stats to compare to very nicely. And there was a bit of a learning curve there, but also a huge motivation. So everyone just had to get on board. No one had the opportunity to do double duty of recording a ref stat, on a paper sheet and on ref analytics through SpringShare. We all just had to get on board, which I was really happy about. And there's no turning back, which was my plan at the beginning of last spring. But anecdotally, yes, our stats are up from last spring too. I think when students were just kind of getting used to what to expect, and now they're used to it. And I think they're going to want to meet with us via Zoom from home at night, going forward, because who wants to traipse into campus on a cold winter night at 7:30 when you can just meet with the librarian after you put your kids to bed or something. So, yeah.
I wish I could say that our numbers are skyrocketing, but they're actually just kind of the same, which is surprising. Chat stats and phone calls have increased, but only in proportion to our in-person questions going down. Obviously, with closure and restricted, we're open right now, but we have restrictions, and no one's really on campus because most classes are not taking place. So yeah, that's kind of a thing we're trying to wrap our heads around right now.
I would say anecdotally, ours is probably about the same too, because we did have the 24/7 chat reference prior to. And the other thing at our institution is that a lot of the interactions are not tracked, because our faculty librarians offer their services however the student's comfortable. So phone call, emails, so some of it we don't really know, or not right now anyway. But be interesting to find out more about that too, and what continuing into the future, now that we do have, enhanced services that are offered online. So that's what I'm eager to find out.
I definitely would be interested from anybody just listening, what kind of experiences you've seen with I think most of us to some degree have adopted some virtual service components, something more or different than we did before. And it'd be interesting to kind of know more about how that has impacted your statistics. Has it kind of woken up a new user base, or are you seeing that they're just maybe shifting to a different platform like they are at Moraine? Or that I think that is worth discussing. So if anybody has some insight on that, absolutely would love to see that. So please feel free to keep adding those in. Martinique just added some statistics that we had 26 last March and 56 this March, and 112 last April and 147 this April. These are walk-in chats, not consultations. So you're seeing an increase there, which is, yeah. And with the new service, new problems, it kind of makes sense. I'm going to move on to the next question, but feel free to keep throwing feedback in the chat on other questions that we can parse it all out later. This was a question that Erica was willing and interested to answer, but do feel free to jump in with another answer too. But how do you elicit feedback from students about these services? How are you? What is the feedback? And what are you doing with it? And even if you aren't, what do you want to do with it? That assessment feedback loop part.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in hearing from people in the chat on this one for sure about your feedback from your students. At College of Lake County, obviously we look at our chat ratings, that tells us something. We also use the quality of service for our ticketing system, that we have a lot of tickets that come in. So every single person that sends an email or that has a follow-up via chat, that turns into a ticket. Those of you that are familiar with the SpringShare services, we do use the quality of service ticketing ratings for that. So we track those. And then for our research appointments, so that's our main method of library instruction at CLC, we use Project Outcome. I'm really interested to know if other libraries are using Project Outcome from ACRL to start to build a bigger assessment pool for their libraries. I will say that our IEPR group, so the folks who gather statistics, say that they aim for a really nice number of feedback would be about 30%, and we average just slightly above 30%. So on every chat, on every ticket, on every appointment. So we have those good solid numbers that we can look at too. Oh, good. I'm seeing someone says that they use Project Outcome too. Thank you, Teresa.
Teresa, yeah. I've thought that Project Outcome is something that Nilrock might want to look at adopting a cohort group of some kind for doing some comparisons across our group together. I thought that would be a good project for us. Who else? Nobody else had raised their hand for this one particularly, but anybody have anything to add, please feel free to do so.
We just started trying to figure out how to collect data on our research consultations, especially to learn about potential equity gaps in how we're serving different populations. So I've been able to work with institutional research to get some information about the different groups that are visiting the library by race or ethnic representation. And so that's something I'm hoping to do more with, so that we weren't collecting data with that in mind. So knowing we can get that information is going to change the follow-up, if we send a follow-up survey or the questions we're asking. Just anecdotally this week, I encouraged all the librarians to send out emails to the students we've worked with, just letting them know, we're still here. Do you have final questions? And so I'm hoping that gives us just some anecdotal feedback. Like, I got an A on my paper or whatever it is. We can't track that because it's not, very organized, but I think it's nice to have that kind of information too.
Martinique, you mentioned, trying to look at your users a little bit more specifically and uniquely. And that leads us, I think, very naturally to the question of accessibility issues that we are seeing, that we're running into potentially with all this switch to virtual services. So I know you were willing to speak. No, I think Amanda put down for this one, but I'd be interested to hear about what obstacles are your users hitting, and how are you grappling with that?
I know during the pandemic, our demand for streaming film just skyrocketed immediately. We had just kind of dipped our toe in the water with Kanopy previously, but otherwise had no streaming film. So that kept me busy, and we're moving forward with that. But accessibility as far as streaming film came into play too, because we had a request from our accessibility services department for descriptive audio. So streaming film with descriptive audio. And I had never looked into this before. I found a resource online that's kind of a repository, but it's not necessarily all streaming. So, and it's very rare, so I checked the VPATs for Swank and Kanopy, which we had, and we're working on it, but we're not quite there. Luckily, they do offer captions, so that's good. But for descriptive audio, it's kind of few and far between. So for one film course, there were 7 films for that course. I was able to find 3 of those that did have descriptive audio, and only one was in a format that we could acquire. we being the library, but the others were available like relatively inexpensive through like, I don't know, Apple or one of those services, but we could not license it institutionally. So that's something I hope that they work on improving into the future.
That's going to be an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Rachel Stivers made the comment that internet access in rural areas is a real problem. And I think that that's something all of us have had to kind of confront head on, and the solutions are inelegant in many ways, and sometimes they work, but I have concerns about what the implications are of us preferencing digital first over face-to-face, maybe in the way we construct our services. That's kind of the other piece of this accessibility, equity piece with technology, right?
I wanted to add too, though, that it's also important to consider other ways for your patrons, right? So we know, right, like what was said about access just to the internet. But obviously a lot of our students have phones. So do you offer like a texting service? Like we have activated, I don't know if other libraries have through their SpringShare products, we have a text line. So it comes in as a ticket, but we can just text right back to them without having to give up a phone number of our own, that kind of thing. Or, if they really want the phone call, but I'm at home and I don't want them to have my number, you can still make the phone call through Zoom. So all of those ways, right, that we can still provide that access to students who can't necessarily just hop on the computer.
I'm going to drop the next question in here, which Marie was interested in, about how do you ensure that services are accessible and useful for all patrons, overcoming barriers imposed by language, cultural diversity, digital divide. It's kind of an extension of what we're already talking about.
Sure. Yeah, and folks have mentioned some of the issues that we've encountered, and I think we encounter them in, quote unquote normal circumstances. I think the pandemic has really made these systemic inequity issues come to light like times 1,000. I think like the digital divide is super visible among our student population. We've seen a number of patrons who don't have access to the resources they need to successfully be in an online learning environment, right? So, and without being able to access the physical space, they don't have the devices they need, they don't have the infrastructure they need. And then, also then there's digital literacy as an issue in itself. And as was mentioned, right, like we're putting these services out there. Not only do folks maybe not have the tools that the hardware and tools that they need, but some folks are having issues navigating the services that we're making available. And it can be frustrating, especially for them. Another issue that we've seen is like there aren't any good textbook e-reserves options. Our physical our physical reserve collection gets used heavily by those who cannot afford textbooks. And from what we know at Moraine, we can't find any good textbook solutions. Yes, we're trying to push OER, but so what can we do, right? We can try to push OER. We can advocate for our patrons when we're talking with our vendors, leverage whatever power we have in those situations. Getting the student feedback and trying to address problems on the spot. I think another way that we're trying at Moraine to address this is through our own learning and reflective practice. We do a ton of internal professional development at Moraine. And as a result, we're having hard conversations, and we've also been creating resources for each other to use. And one example of this is when the pandemic started, we sort of expanded a lot of our research guides, and we're not a LibGuide shop, a SpringShare LibGuide shop. Most of our library research guides were on our website, but we started using Google Docs a lot, and of course making video tutorials. Well, a couple of our librarians, Tish Hayes and Dan Matthews, put together an incredible resource guide on how to make the guides that we're making and the video tutorials we're making more accessible. So, there's information about web content accessibility guidelines with the tools we're using, closed caption options, things like that. Information that I know a lot of us benefited from. So it's just these sort of like little, I've heard this term recently at a webinar, used in a webinar, micro interventions. Like we can't change the system, but we can intervene on a smaller scale and hopefully make a difference there. And one last thing is, I think, folks discussed this in the beginning. I think just making the most of our interactions with students when we get the opportunity to connect with them is super important as well right now.
Has a couple of interesting comments in the chat about, oh my gosh, I just lost it because it flew out of the view here. Ashton mentioned about the digitization service that they've started to, kind of bridge some of those equity gaps with access to print materials. We've followed in your footsteps, and we're offering the same thing now. And I definitely took a page out of your playbook to do it. So I encourage you to talk to Ashton if you want to learn more about implementing digitization. I'm happy to be a resource too. And then there was a comment about how students don't particularly like to talk on the phone, but texting, really using the platform that they really particularly like, and in emphasizing the access through that is probably the simplest way to get to them. Okay, I'm going to throw one more question in here that kind of shifts the conversation a little bit here toward kind of expertise and training. What kind of technical staff do you feel is necessary to build and maintain these services? And then that's the implementation piece, but then what kind of training is necessary for other staff? What's that look like? And Martinique and Amanda were on deck for this.
Well, I know at our library, it's a very small library, not a small sum, but I'm really the only person at our library who typically works with the technology piece and works with our IT department to make the technology happen for the library. So it's been a very busy year and kind of a struggle. But I do have colleagues that stepped up and, came out from circulation and help get these systems up and rolling in time, which I'm grateful for, but that's always the challenge. And then the training online, I do have colleagues that technology is not their favorite thing. So then it's been kind of a barrier to learning all of the new systems that have come, either the ones that we've adopted in order to better serve our students during this time, or, our other projects that were happening anyway. So it's, sometimes it's a struggle, but doing the best we can, we use Teams a lot, phone calls.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's too bad that that we have been apart, because I feel like some of the learning around these new technologies happens really nicely when you see other people do it, but unfortunately that doesn't happen a lot. And I've talked with my wife is a preschool teacher, and in the beginning was teaching preschool online in the room across the hall. And I would hear everything. And I actually learned a lot from that, even though she was working with like 3, 4, 5-year-olds. She would say things like, okay, if you can hear me, everybody put your hands on your head. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to do that with college students, but it just reminded me that there's a lot of things I can do to check in, or a friend who's a high school teacher was telling me everyone keeps their screen off, but once in a while she'll say, we're going to take a break and we're all going to just flash our cameras on just for a minute. So go to gallery mode and flash our cameras on just to kind of keep people engaged. So with our librarians, most of them would totally do that. Yeah, I think they actually would. I provided resources when I could, but I think one of the things that was most successful is we're a 2-campus college. So we typically, during pre-pandemic, had a librarian at both campus. at both campuses. So we had 2 people on Ask Library at a time. And we designated one as the lead. And so they were the first person to pick up chats. And the other one was sort of not backup. They were present and they could take appointments, but they didn't have to have like their finger on the trigger quite as much. And specifically dedicated that time to improving our subject LibGuides and to learning some of the new instructional technology. So like doing SpringShare webinars or recordings, experimenting with making videos. And everyone just sort of did that in the way that worked for them. So if there was something we had access to that was a paid service, or if they did a free thing, I got access to Powtoons, a colleague got access to Canva, other people were using Screencast-O-Matic. So I feel really lucky that we had so many people who were really kind of motivated to use that time to do those things. And of course, other people were a lot more intimidated and didn't want to teach on Zoom. And we also had a lot of asynchronous teaching. So we really did that by way of making LibGuides more interactive. And I tried to share with the librarians as people created some of those, to get new ideas, because once again, we are all existing in this total vacuum and not seeing the work. So I tried to kind of share that work as I could.
I can add that at COD, when we added lots of new virtual stuff, we started with meetings for training where you invite a large group, but there were people who were never going to get up to speed with just an introduction and going over the written notes. And we did follow up with one-on-one training sessions with the people like Laura, who you just met earlier. She's the chair of our public services committee. She implements a lot of these technologies, and it was lots of one-on-one meetings with those people and a follow-up in some cases. And in some cases, some of those people just still are not really able to be successful in those modalities. And we've had to kind of schedule around that to make sure people are able to still contribute. We're getting close to the end here. I did have one more question to throw up here. And it's more just kind of related to implementation in general. It's the wrong question. No, it's the right question. Losing my mind here. And it was just, how has it looked under pressure? Were you able to manage it? How do you manage this change? I think we just all can acknowledge that it's just hard, but any special advice that you would give to anybody who's trying to add some more services on how to manage the change? And Marie, I think you were on for this one, but anybody could answer.
I think, it's like our normal approach, only it has to be a little bit faster. We have to react a little bit faster, and we have to do it remotely, which are, 2 sort of levels of extra added challenges. I think what I've seen at my library is the successes that we've had was sort of due to how we manage change in general at the library. And I think it kind of sets us up for, for dealing with unexpected or crisis management a little bit better. I think, and I want to say we have really great leadership in the library, and Tara's gone, but shout out to Tara and my other colleagues. But I think the leadership has worked really hard through the years to make us more team-centered and change ready. And I think, things like being transparent and inclusive, where all library staff is encouraged to give feedback, is helpful. And some of the projects that we've implemented during the pandemic are a result of input at all levels. And that said, I think that focusing on staff training, not like taking it for granted, has been a really key component for us in our change management strategy. So not only, of course, we want to be able to support the new services, but we also, I think, want all of our staff to feel like they're not lost or left behind. And yes, there's always resistance and things like that, and folks who need extra help. But I think we make those opportunities available And that's one way that I think we've been able to manage it a little bit better.
Wonderful. Do you have any final thoughts or anything you'd like to add that we didn't discuss? We're coming right to the end of our time. If you don't, I'll just ask the forum here if anybody else has anything they'd like to throw out. The comments in the chat are excellent. We'll capture those and so you can review them later as well. I'm seeing, the suggestion that maybe some more informal conversation around these topics that isn't so, panel and presenter oriented would be beneficial because we're learning organically which tools people are using. So I think that's something that PDC offering, Brian's suggesting that our professional development committee could look at hosting some open informal meetups on topics like this. And you don't have to be a committee member, it would just be a drop-in maybe. So I think it's an excellent suggestion. All right, I feel like we have come to the end of a marathon. These meetings, even though we try to break them up, always feel incredibly long. And I'm very much wanting to go get some lunch. I'm sure you all feel the same way. So I think I'd just like to end by thanking this group of panelists for bringing your energy and your perspective to this topic. And I'd like to thank everyone who presented and engaged and presented questions and provided your own experiences, because we just all learn from each other so much. And with that, I would just like to thank you all for attending this day, and I look forward to seeing you at other NILROC events in the future. Have a wonderful day. And
Jennifer, thank you for your work as chair this year.
thank you,
Thank you,
Ashton.
Jennifer. It was a marathon. You did great.
Yeah.
Sweat. Whew, need a nap. We've earned it. Oh, is it Friday? Yes. Knew it felt like Friday. Okay, wonderful to see you all, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.